let me get to Jake Butt had himself a little sit down with Ryan O'Halloran of the Denver Post, and I want to get to that. But first, I got to set the stage just really quick for our listeners. The last time we saw hide nor hair of Mr. Jake Butt was in the dress rehearsal game, the third preseason game last summer. And it was the only time in the 2019 calendar year for football that we actually got to see Butt, because if fans can remember, he basically redshirted his rookie year in 2017 as a fifth-round pick. And the Broncos knew that when they drafted him, because he had just torn his ACL in Michigan's bowl game just a few months before they picked him. 2018, everything's looking good. He's rehabbed. He's back. They kind of slow roll him in training camp and then build up steam throughout the preseason. And he's on the 53-man roster to open the season. Things are looking good. Appears in week 1, week 2, week 3. And then in between week 3 and week 4 during a practice, he suffers a re-aggravation to that knee, done for the season. And that was really the last injury that he had. And it was almost 18 months ago. And last year when he appeared in that third game, he thought everything was good. He was really excited after that third preseason game. He thought he was back in the saddle. Woke up the next morning, Eric, stiff, pain, swelling, didn't know what was going on. So the Broncos played it safe, did a scope on his knee to clean up anything, and just said, let's live to fight another day. Well, here we are, Eric, in that other day, if you will. It is 2020. He's heading into a contract year, and it's really make or break. Here's what he told Ryan O'Halloran of the Denver Post in terms of an update on that knee. Quote, "My knee is good. I'm doing everything, running and lifting. This offseason has been a little bit weird for everybody, having to bounce around and train anywhere you can, but I've still been getting good work in. I feel good about things and excited about playing ball again." Close quote. Eric, there's a couple other things he touched on that I want to get your thoughts on, but first, give me your overall outlook on Jake Butt heading into this 2020 summer.
Well, it's going to be definitely an interesting year with everything that's going on in the world and not having the offseason programs. It's going to be a little bit more harder on him to really show what he can bring right now. And Denver, they've all but moved on really with going after Nick Vannett and then Albert Okwuegbunam and bringing them in. They really strengthened that tight end group that they have. And so there's going to be a strong competition there. And can Jake Butt really make himself known in that group? That's what we're going to have to see here. And he just doesn't have the time to really do it without just blowing everybody away. I mean, when Denver drafted him, he was a guy that he was there in the 5th round because of that knee injury that many felt he had 2nd, 3rd round talent. He still does, but he's just got to stay out there on that field. And one good thing that is for him, though, is the tight end room for the Broncos is just really filled with solid players. Like, nobody really exceptional at the moment. So that is something that's benefiting Drew Lock or Jake Butt with this, and just potentially help him make this roster.
Absolutely true. And this is something that we kind of touched on right before we hit the old go live button tonight, is that, you know, he's being dismissed, and he is dismissed because it's kind of one of those, you know, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me things, where people don't want to get their hopes up, right? They figure, well, that injury he suffered in 2018 in between week 3 and week 4, the last ACL tear that he actually had, was his 3rd injury to that knee in his football career, and 2nd within about an 18-month period. And so fans don't want to get their hopes up. It's easy to dismiss him, and the odds, obviously at this stage, with this being his 4th year and he's only appeared in 3 games, they're not in his favor. But if you actually look at the situation of that tight end room, as you just intimated, Eric, there's no Tony Gonzalez ahead of him. There's no, Antonio Gates. There's no Shannon Sharp. There is a Noah Fant who had a record-breaking, or record-setting, I should say, rookie campaign with 1st-round pedigree that everyone's expecting to take a leap forward. But it's not like Fant himself had some kind of Pro Bowl campaign in 2019. He's going to be given the benefit of the doubt and every opportunity to succeed and be the number one because of his draft pedigree and what he produced as a rookie. But if you look beyond Fant, as you said, Nick Vannett, they just paid him a 2-year deal. Good chance he's going to stick regardless of what happens with Butt. Jeff Hireman kind of on the bubble in terms of, if he fails to really rise to the occasion, the Broncos probably just cut bait and save $4.5 million or whatever it is. And then a litany of former draft picks and guys that they need answers on, whether that's Troy Fumagalli, Jake Butt himself, Austin Fort bouncing back from an ACL, and then, of course, Andrew Beck. So he has an opportunity here, Eric, if he can stay healthy, to at least fight his way onto this roster. Obviously, the Broncos, they have been extremely and exceedingly patient. So they want him to be on this roster.
Yeah.
If he stays healthy, he's on the roster. You think I'm wrong?
It really comes down to how many they end up keeping. I really think that they don't keep more than 3. And if with that fourth one, with them being able to pull up a guy off the practice squad, I think that's what they're looking at with that fourth guy. And I'm looking at that for Andrew Beck because he has that ability to go back and play that fullback, which Pat Shurmur doesn't really use. But when it's called for, they kind of need that piece there. So I don't really see where he fits in. I'm looking at Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam, and Nick Vanette as those 3 tight ends. But it's also a possibility that they keep Jake Butt around on the practice squad because he is eligible for it due to some rule changes that they've had. So he can sit there and still stick around on that, and they can continue to try and work with him, let him develop, let him get back into football shape because really with how long he's been away and how little he's played, we don't know where he's at in regards to being able to actually play the game and being in shape for that. So they can sit there and continue to work with him on that and just see what he's able to do with it, more development, especially as a blocker, and potentially move on from Nick Vanette next year and let Jake Butt make the roster. They have their options open for him. I have a hard time seeing him make the roster this year. They definitely want him to step up and just show what he can do, show that potential that they saw when they drafted him, despite the knee injury. And it's there, just going to need a lot of work.